Me.
Okay, hey everybody, just gonna turn off that pesky waiting room. Excellent. Okay, hello, and welcome to our inaugural event from the ACS local section for 2023. My name is Graham Dobreiner, and I'm going to try not saying too much this evening. But first, I just want to say hello. And if you're interested at all in getting involved in the things that the local section does, and there are a lot of things that we do, I encourage you to contact me. And I'd love to chat about some of our activities and goings on, and to give you a better sense about programming here in the Philadelphia area. Specifically tonight, we're going to be talking about Project Seed. And after introductions of our esteemed panelists, we'll have a brief discussion, and following that, Q&A and a discussion of next steps for anyone interested in getting more involved in the program. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Dr. Presley, and I have some visual aids that I will share once he instructs me to do so. So Brandon, take it away.
Thanks, Graham. Evening, everyone. So my name is Brandon Presley. I have a lot going on in my life, but I am a scientist at J&J as my full-time work in biotherapeutics, doing analytical development and managing outsourced testing for residual process impurities. I am also a fellow OWL, and I teach forensic courses at Temple University as an adjunct associate professor. And then in my spare time, I have a t-shirt business, a science t-shirt business that my wife and I run together called Simple Science Tees. And we have a mission of spreading the gospel of chemistry and science all around the world. So that's really fun. I participated in Project Seed during the summers of 2004 and 2005. All right, Graham, we can roll out the photos. So these are some of my throwback images. You know how like every advertisement for a chemistry undergrad or graduate programs has like a group of multiple people staring at nothing? I'm pretty sure we were staring at something. I think that's like a balance or something that measures something. I don't remember. But yeah, so this is one photo. I think there's a few more. Yeah, so for this one, I do remember this one. My project was synthesis of a biomarker of cyanide ingestion. So I do remember specifically going through the synthetic process. So maybe we'll get to talk a little bit more about that later. I think there might be one or two more. This is me and my research group. So the gentleman on the left of the screen is Dan. He was my research partner. And then our mentor was Owen, who was a medical student, I believe at Drexel. So the way we were partnered up was with another high school student and a graduate student mentor who was in medical school. And then we had a second mentor who was in grad school and master's degree in forensic science. I think there's one more. Yep. And so every summer, or at the end of every summer, we would our final product would be a poster, and we would present that poster at the fall ACS conference. So it gave us quite a bit of exposure to the research world and how to present your research at a professional conference. So these are my throwbacks. And thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. Fantastic content here. Next, I'll ask Sharon Haney to introduce herself.
Good evening. No visuals. I am now retired from DuPont Central Research, which is where I had all of the seed students. I had about 16 whom I was a mentor for. But I want to acknowledge the fact that my familiarity and awareness of Project Seed came from my time at Bell Laboratories. I was there for 3 years in northern New Jersey and was active in the New Jersey Metro Women's Chemists Group and that local subtopical group of the ACS. And through Susan Fahrenholtz, who has been long successful in creating a great seed program, became aware of seed program. And so when I migrated a little further south to the Delaware area, I knew that that was something I wanted to do, and was very fortunate that at the early in the 1990s, there was a very charismatic and wonderfully community-based chemist in the agricultural chemicals community within DuPont. His name was Jesse Hips, and he created a fairly successful program during the time he was there, which brought mentors, and he worked very closely with the local schools in the Wilmington, Delaware area. So I got my first entry into Project Seed through a program that was largely coordinated, that really just required my participation as someone who identified the right match of student and then spending those 9 weeks. But he had a wonderful program that had sort of all the markers that we may talk about later for success in terms of fostering inter-student, interactions, as well as supplemental activities for the students. And similar to Brandon's experience, if the student didn't go to a national meeting, there was a formal poster session at the conclusion of the summer program held at either DuPont or University of Delaware, where the students had the opportunity to present their work. So that was about a third of my Project Seed experience as a mentor. And then it pivoted, because when Jesse left to go back to Alabama to replicate some of the success he had in Delaware, like many programs where there's a strong leader, it wasn't sustainable. And so I continued to stay involved with Project Seed, but it required me as an individual doing the legwork, creating the relationships with teachers to identify the right students and to create the appropriate environment so that the students got a good experience. And so that was the bulk of my experience with Project Seed. And as opposed to having a formal poster session at the conclusion of the summer, they became pretty intimately integrated into the research teams in my group. So they were expected to give regular updates on their research through the summer, and definitely a concluding presentation at the end of it. So I'll leave it there, and I guess there'll be questions that people will ask of all three of us.
Great, thanks, Sharon. And finally, last but not least, we have Jeremy, who has a impressive slide deck, and I guess we can go through this and then start with some discussion.
Thanks so much, Graham. Thank you. And Graham, with these slides, since this was designed in part to kind of go through the next steps and all that as well, so we can. It's up to you as to I can just introduce myself and my experience with Seed now, and then we can come back to the other slides later, whatever you prefer. Yeah,
that sounds perfect.
Yeah, so we can just stick with this one for now. So I'm Jeremy Hyman. I've been involved with Project Seed for about 12 or 13 years now. I also was brought into the fold by Susan Fahrenholtz of the North Jersey and New York region a while back, for me, I've been involved as a volunteer in a coordinating capacity for a while, for about 9 years in the Bronx, New York, and then briefly in the Lehigh Valley, and then COVID happened, and then now here in Philadelphia since for the past year and a half, 2 years. So I'm a former chemist turned teacher turned various things in the world of STEM education as a practitioner, as a researcher of STEM education, et cetera. And I've for quite some time been quite impressed with the impact that early access to research programs like Project Seed can have and have had on students that I've worked with, and students that with whom I've conducted research over the years as well. And so I'm excited to be here tonight. I really appreciate getting to be here with two really phenomenal other esteemed co-panelists. I thank Graham and ACS Philly for setting this up and for their support. And we're really at this point really looking to expand the footprint of Project Seed here in Philadelphia, following from some conversations that I've had with Graham and some of his colleagues. So I can pause there, and perhaps then we can continue during or following the questions as to next steps and some of the kind of finer points around getting involved. But just briefly, I mean, over my years with Project Seed, I've coordinated and worked with it's been a few dozen students, probably somewhere around 55 or 60, and many of whom I've stayed in touch with afterwards. And certainly I can speak to the impact. You'll see some photos of some of the former students when I'm talking through some of the details later, but certainly a lot of not only warm memories, but I think just seeing a lot of impact of the program over time, from students who I had actually taught and advised and mentored in other capacities, and then other students who I've worked with and matched up with scientists who I've found to be amenable to Seed over the years, and who've really brought students into their labs, into the fold of the program and of the research. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. And I have to credit Jeremy entirely with my participation in Project Seed last summer, which was an outstanding experience. And one of the things that I wanted to start with in discussing the impact of Project Seed is talking a little bit about motivation for your participation for the three panelists. So Sharon and Jeremy, you spoke a lot about sort of the people network around you that sort of made it maybe easier, and the towering figure in Seed's history who kind of showed you the way. And I guess my follow-up to that would be, well, what motivated you to take on that challenge of working with a high school student or coordinating high school students research? For me, as someone who runs a lab, I saw both opportunities and these sort of enormous challenges of finding a way to offer an experience for high school students that was enriching and safe and doable in a 8 to 10 week period. And so I'm thinking that maybe other people in the audience have similar feelings. They're thinking about participating. So tell us a little bit about your, I guess, motivation for participating.
So I'll step into that. So I think first and foremost, my motivation really came out of sort of a personal sense of loss, if I'm going to put it that way. So no question, I'm closer to the founding of the Project Seed than the other participants. And so I have very, very graphic memory of 1968, the turmoil in our society out of which Project Seed was born. And I also recall during that period trying to seek research or laboratory experience as someone who had already, as a young teenager, identified as a potential chemist, and finding barriers to that. I ultimately found my way into a laboratory setting at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, where I was raised and grew up, but I was locked out, so to speak, of getting into some of the more prestigious laboratory programs for high school students. And so part of it was, again, wanting to provide a haven for students like me who may have had a longing for that. And then I think it became broader in the sense of, wanting to just provide an opportunity for students, whether or not they had an interest in science or not, but to give them exposure to something that would keep them in track, to go on to college, which I think was the initial aim of the Project Seed program. So that was my initial motivation. Again, as I said, fulfillment of loss, but also then taking my own personal loss and wanting to sort of pay it forward to provide a home for students. And again, with no specific intent on this being a pipeline to science, but to give them an exposure of how science can be enriching in their lives, and to make sure that they went on to the next step.
Thanks, Sharon. Jeremy, you could talk a little bit about, I guess, your experiences and background and preparation, and how that sort of brought you to being a Uber coordinator for the SEED program.
Thanks. So that's a tough act to follow with everything that Sharon shared there with respect to, her lived experience and her history intertwining with the whole history of SEED, really. But I thank you for that framing, Graham. So I had pivoted from my original training in chemistry to a career in science education shortly before I got involved with SEED, and I had made a decision after finishing my bachelor's and master's, where I was a classmate of Graham and a couple other people in the room in the Zoom room who I'm amused to see here today. And I kind of had pivoted from my original goals of pursuing a career in chemistry research to wanting to pursue a career where I could try to build bridges and open doors for other individuals to succeed in pursuing STEM majors and careers. And that kind of stemmed out of some interests that grew with me during and after my college years, specifically, I guess, interest, as well as kind of some indignance at some of the inequities that I saw around access to higher ed, and especially access and some of the barriers that existed kind of in the sciences, certainly in my home in chemistry and beyond. And so I pivoted and found myself moving to New York to be a founding teacher at a school serving English language learners in the Bronx. And as I was originally a classroom teacher and then moved in doing some other things there, I saw, I knew how impactful mentorship was. I knew how impactful early exposure to research and early students having experience with tasks and work that's authentic to being a scientist, how impactful that could be. And so I originally reached out to this woman, Susan Fahrenholz, who's been involved with the majority of SEED's history, about just like how I can get my students involved. And she very quickly talked me into becoming a new SEED coordinator for the Bronx. It just kind of made sense with the interest that I had and like the work that I was trying to do, and so it initially started out with, this was a way that I could connect my own students who I was teaching and advising with some research opportunities. So I kind of, just start reaching out and kind of cold calling folks in academia across New York City, and then kind of became a little more structured over time. But that's kind of, I'll stop there because I can wax on and on, but I'll pause. We have a lot more to talk about, and other panelists too.
So Brandon, obviously your experience in SEED comes from the other side as a student. It must have been intimidating. I can imagine walking into a lab for the first time as a high school student. What really motivated you to do it and get over, if you had any fears? How did you get over them and say, this is the thing I want to do?
So I'll say 100% a support system. So one of our high school counselors actually told me about the program. He had known like one of the people who helped recruit for the program and had also just been connected with, I guess, people who went through it previously. And for those who may not be aware, I participated in summer of 2004 and 2005 at the Frederick Reeders Family Foundation Forensic Sciences Mentoring Institute, which is in Willow Grove. So began very early on to become interested in forensic science. I was really good at chemistry my 11th grade year. So that's when the counselor recommended the program and said, I think you'd be a good fit. Why don't you go ahead and apply? So I did. There was an interview process. So I had to go and, of course, they give you a lab tour and tell you about it and everything. It was the first time I had been in an upscale, top-notch research lab. So all of the equipment was new, the terminology was new, but the mentors in the program, they understood all of that, right? That dynamic of coming from, just a regular high school where you don't have super sophisticated equipment, and just taught us everything that we needed to know. And my parents were very supportive, so that was also important for me as well. One thing that I will say too is that the mentors were very, I think strict is too strong of a word, but they were a little tough on us, making sure that we were there on time every day, taking care of business, not, slacking and all of that, which is very, very important because they, you need those kinds of skills in the professional world. So it was very, it was life-changing. I can literally say it was life-changing because it prepped me for a career in the sciences and a future in the sciences. And by the time I finished the program, my second year, I had no doubt that I wanted to go to college for chemistry. So I was uncertain going into the program. Initially, I was kind of debating between, music and other options, but I decided to go with science because of that program.
It's outstanding. And not only did you go on to college, get your PhD, that lasting impact is it's amazing. That formative summer put you on a path to success and STEM success. It's definitely an inspiring thing. So the lasting impact for Seed for you is clear, I guess. Sharon, what was the lasting impact for you for Seed? Did you feel like you were able to do what you set out to do when you started it?
So I would say it was an evolution. So what surprised me out of my experience with those students was what they brought to the community and what they brought to me. The expectation, I think, initially, which is why most of my careers, almost none of them during the time that I was doing it alone at the experimental station, would willingly even think about mentoring a high school student for 8 to 9 weeks. Many of them shied away from even undergraduates. Was the fact that the transfer of information and insight would be two ways. So I learned a lot from them, both culturally as well as gift recognition. I mean, I very clearly recall the first year that I became a mentor of the Project Seed program. I had two students, and I had in my mind a certain way of approaching how I would onboard them and get them trained safety wise, as well as getting them up to speed in terms of the tools and understanding of the research project. And very quickly, they taught me that they could recognize in each other what gifts and skills they had and how it might work out better for them. And so I learned from that first experience to step back and to take cues from the student. So that was a lasting legacy in terms of sort of not a top-down approach, but more of a communal interaction in terms of bringing the students on board. The students, again, I think very quickly changed my expectation of how I saw them in this community, because I think I bought in initially when I came in under the program when Jesse Hips was coordinating it for DuPont and the students. He was doing a phenomenal job of identifying the students, interactions with the teachers, and placing students in different laboratories. And so the model raised then to get DuPont community to buy into it, that, you know, we were building a bridge to the next generation of scientists. But I think very quickly I recognized, and the students were fairly, that I got, were fairly quick and honest to provide feedback that science might not be in their future, in, you know, in the traditional sense in which we are looking at, but this research experience was a wonderful venue for them, just as Brandon talked about, in terms of learning rules of engagement in a professional world. You know, how you comport yourself, expectations of showing up, you know, on time, how to navigate a world multi-generational. You know, they've lived their lives in tiny 3-year, 4-year clips in terms of where they enter and the upper level peers, and how to manage that. And very quickly I let go of the expectation of this being a pipeline to scientists, but just to be successful citizens in the world where they appreciate the value of research and some of the tools that they learned in the SEED experience with, you know, how to make decisions and navigate in their own world. And I would say there were only, there are 16 students that I mentored over a career, and 3 or 4 of them I think I could identify as scientists. You know, someone off into finance or language. But, you know, I think did my role in terms of ushering people who I think were better prepared to deal with the world at the next step.
So Jeremy, what impacts have you seen on students and mentors in your decade or so of SEED participation? And I guess how does it compare to the maybe more senior students, undergraduates and grad students in labs? You know, how do you see that experience?
That's a good question. Well, I've certainly seen, you know, how SEED can help. I mean, to go along the lines of part of what Sharon was saying, you know, for some students, it can really help kind of reinforce and ensure that they're on a path for and preparing for success at the next going to college in general, right? And I've also seen for many students how it's been impactful in terms of, you know, for one, setting them up for success potentially as STEM majors. I've seen a good number of these since these are students I didn't, for the most part, not just students I found, the students who I already knew before, for the most part, right? I've kind of seen what they've gone off and what they've done. And, you know, a number of them now have degrees in science and or engineering and or are in graduate or professional school. I was just talking with one whose photo appears later in my slide deck the other day, who just finished her biology degree and is going back to school next year, and another one who's told about her new engineering position back in New York City. And, you know, it's and great, you know, obviously there's a lot of different experiences and factors and people and support systems that contributes. But I think that I've seen how SEED can be impactful in terms of just what students are exposed to and aware of. The school that I worked in the Bronx for 11 years, the lab, when I was a teacher, we didn't have any running water in the lab. So you can imagine how big of a difference it was for students to go from my classroom to then working in a lab in the summer at Columbia or NYU or Einstein, right? Pretty large difference, you know. And, you know, thus there are some gaps then in terms of what they would have seen lab wise or not. And, you know, that was part of my time with SEED. I've now worked with students from all sorts of other schools and contexts, you know. But I think that it's been really helpful in terms of broadening students' network, broadening their awareness of what's out there, what's possible, about like the fact that a career in research is possible. And a lot of students I've worked with who think about who are familiar with a pretty small cadre of careers. And it's really helpful in terms of helping them see what else is out there. I still remember one of the students in one of my slides when I told her that she could come back for summer 2. literally jumping up and down because she wanted to continue working in this nanotech lab that she was working in, and just like was so excited by the work that they were doing there, and just it's it's not to say that every student has a straightforward trajectory from their experience seed. That is not all the case, but I think it's certainly been something that's helped in a number of ways. It's also helped, there's been students who have then earned ACS Project Seed scholarships from the ACS, where that's helped the Fordham College. There's students for whom it's also something that I think has, for a number of students I've worked with, stuck out when they're applying and interviewing for college and for scholarships, that they have this experience that lots of other students did not have, and they excelled in it. So yeah, that's part of the impact. I think I also just a little more broadly can say that I think that for a lot of the students that I worked with, especially in my earlier years in SEED, I saw that certainly SEED couldn't substitute in per se for some of the other resources and coursework to which they did not have access, but it certainly helped. And some of my prior research has been around kind of questioning the status quo around who's seen by college admissions officers and others as so-called legitimate contenders for success in four-year colleges and in STEM majors in particular. And I think that experiences in programs like SEED can make a real dent and a real impact, especially when the students are from some of the more under-resourced of schools. And students in SEED, as you may imagine, come from a variety of different high school settings and contexts, but it's I think it's especially, and it has different impacts for different students for various reasons, but I think especially for students in schools where there aren't a lot of advanced courses per se, or a lot of facilities, it's especially eye-opening and can be especially impactful with respect to what they do moving forward.
Thank you, Jeremy.
You're welcome.
That's maybe I'll pivot a bit from there, talking a little bit about the preparation of students before they walk into that lab for their SEED experience, and maybe what we can think about is some of the largest barriers to participation. Once you've decided to be part of SEED, I guess in your experiences, what were the toughest things to navigate, and since you were able to navigate them and be successful, what did you do to solve those problems? What did you have to do to pivot? I know, Sharon, you talked a little bit about, your expectations changed as you were mentoring. Were there any other challenges that you had to deal with and barriers you had to think about that maybe didn't come up or you didn't think of when you started?
And I'll speak exclusively during the time I was doing this alone, which was most of the time in terms of submitting my requests through the Project SEED for approval of the project, et cetera, recruiting students. So the challenges for me were, which I quickly overcame. The first one, which was finding a network of counselors or heads of science departments in the local community to provide the pipeline of students for me to recruit from. I did not live in the Wilmington area. I lived in Philadelphia. And so I actually had to create and foster those relationships and build a trust and rapport with those educators. And about 6 or 7, it turns out I had students that came from almost every high schools in the Newcastle County area in Delaware. So I didn't just cherry pick and go to charter, which had a reputation for top students in science. So that was one. But having done that the first year or 2 years, I had then that already set that served me well for the remaining years. The second, probably the biggest hurdle, and I think this is something that people who are in industry would confront, is the legal structure to bring in a student that is under the age in which they even bring in employees. So I had students typically the ages of 16 and 17. And ultimately, I had to rely on my own personal advocacy and tenure, so to speak, in my institution to convince the first, director that this is something I can manage, and creating the legal template with our legal department so that we had an agreement that made sense for someone whom they would not consider an employee, and figuring out that language. And that became a template that it just replicated year after year, and it was sort of a no-brainer. So those were the two biggest challenges. And once I overcame those obstacles, it was pretty, easy for me to say, we've done this. The questions that emerge from, especially from industrial community, are issues around safety, who is responsible for that, and the pay structure, because these are not employees. They didn't want any monies flowing from their coffers into the students. And so using the local section, which the ACS, handles beautifully, made it fairly easy. And so, having navigated those for the first few years, it made it very easy to, to do this year in and year out. And ultimately, the students became the best ambassadors and selling point for the program. Their success, the way they handled themselves, the way they spoke in meetings, even in group meetings where some of the younger professionals felt uncomfortable talking. I mean, I was pretty, my expectations were pretty, I'm going to say stern. Brandon, as you were talking about one of your mentors, very clear for me. I set expectations in terms of student, how they were to participate for the program at the very beginning. There was sort of no nonsense in that approach.
So Brandon, besides dealing with stern supervision from your supervisors, what did you find to be the toughest? I know this is going back now. This is 16 years or something, but as best you can remember back in the day, as a student, what was maybe the most challenging thing for you starting research?
I mean, I think it kind of ties into what I said before and into what Sharon just mentioned about like getting into that professional routine and structure, right? Like it's different from just showing up to high school and sitting in a class all day, right? Listening to a lecture, doing your classwork, doing your homework. It was, and I think our program started at 8. So, right, it's like getting there at 7:45 to put your things away, to be in the classroom. Like we had a classroom where there would be instruction given about, what the plan was for the week and everything. So, right, you had to be there, you had to be on time, you had to engage. We also had every Thursday was presentation day. And so all of the work that you've done, all the data you've collected, all your findings and conclusions from the previous week, you had to give a weekly summary to the whole entire class. So there were probably 12 or so students each summer, because I also was a C2 student. So each summer there were about 12 students. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the first summer we had 2 mentors, plus the directors of the program. And then the second summer, we each had 1 mentor. But on Thursdays, we will all have to give a presentation of all of our data. So you had to be working on your presentation during the week, right? Like as you're collecting data, as you're making your conclusions, to get ready for presentation day on Thursday. And then Wednesday was practice day. And a certain day of the week, the founder of our program, who was also one of the mentors, would come in. He and his laboratory partner, I'll say, Dr. D, they would come in and they would listen to like us practice our presentations. And let's just say when the 2 of them were in the room, everybody was on edge because they were pretty brutal. I mean, they had no filter, and they would tell you that your font was horrible, that you didn't explain that well, like all the things that you need to hear, but you don't want to hear. But I mean, think about it. At the age of 16, you're getting that kind of critique from someone who's like world renowned in their field, right? Like these are very professional, accomplished individuals who have taken the time out to invest in you. And it really meant a lot to hear it from them. And I can joke about it now, going through it and getting embarrassed sometimes wasn't fun, but there may be more constructive ways to give feedback. But I wouldn't change any of that. Like it was a very fun experience. And it was much needed. So that was a challenge in itself too. Again, just getting adjusted to that professional schedule and expectation, because you are expected to deliver, to work collaboratively with your partners. I wouldn't say it was a challenge for me, but it was an opportunity also for me to become more acquainted with a diverse group of individuals. So I went to a pretty diverse, in terms of ethnicity, high school. So it wasn't a huge adjustment for me, but in both of our cohorts in Seed, there were people from all different types of ethnic backgrounds. And I think that was very, very cool to see that degree of diversity in the sciences. And so, right, like that's had an impact on me too, because as you progress in your career, as you go to college and all that kind of stuff, you're exposed to people from many, many different cultural backgrounds. And it's very nice to be able to be a part of that at such a young age, and especially in formative times like that. So
Sharon, go ahead.
I just want to mention one point that Brandon mentioned, I realized was a challenge for me, for most of my students. So they were a community of one in terms of, at the experimental station, I was usually the only person, out when Jesse Hipp's NAP program ended, or I would say most of the time I mentored students, they were the only high school student on the campus. It was a large campus. And it was very clear that they're not having a peer group to affiliate with, was a loss for them. And so I realized that I had to work hard to try to get them connected, sort of like near peer mentoring, with any undergraduates or graduate students who were present on campus. And very quickly they found their own people, so to speak, that they could, get insight and form a very informal community to go to lunch with, and to learn, what the next step is going to look like. And I think that's very important. One, to be cognizant of, if you're in a community, how to forge bridges that will make that student feel a little bit more at home than they would otherwise.
I see Jeremy was nodding vigorously as you were talking about the near peer interactions. So in your experience, Jeremy, seeing these Seed students succeed, how have a lot of challenges been overcome by student mentor teams?
Yeah, so I really appreciate you bringing that up, Sharon. That near peer piece is so critical, right? So absolutely, like I've absolutely seen where undergrad and grad students can be phenomenal, like kind of conduits and bridge builders for students, and even just, I think also when they're even 2 or 3 labs in a department that are hosting students, or 2 students in 1 lab, right? That can be really, really helpful, as well. And you'll see here later when I ask about, it's always, I'll ask, if someone wants to mentor, you want to mentor 1 or 2. 2 is always better than 1 for multiple reasons. One, I mean, yes, one, so you can have more, we can provide more students the opportunity, but also to provide a little bit more of a sense of the community to students, and someone else for them to be bouncing ideas off of who's a peer of theirs. So I don't have a ton to add for this question, but just, I think that one of the things I think that for some students, kind of learning to advocate for themselves, especially in this very new environment, that they haven't been part of before can be challenging, especially like there are situations I've seen over the years where, for the most part, I've been really fortunate that the vast majority of mentors who sign on, they and or the individuals in their group who are working directly with the students do a really great job and are very attentive and kind of pretty hands-on with the students and really try to ensure that they're crafting an experience that is beneficial to the students. Occasionally, you have a situation where let's say a seed student is assigned to a postdoc who's just completely talking over their head, and really just and that can be hard for a student to know to either feel that they're not smart enough and to feel like they don't fit in order to feel like not to know how to speak up for themselves. So it's only happened a couple times. I remember that happening a few years ago with a couple of labs where that it was and that kind of created some opportunities to interact with the PIs to kind of check in and with other individuals who are involved in the department to try to address that, and also hopefully this is kind of a teachable moment of learning. I remember in one of the cases in particular, a student really becoming skilled, I think, more at speaking up for themselves and advocating and voicing that what they needed to better access some of the project material so that they have a successful summer. And those are certainly pieces. And I mean, for for some students, transportation can be a challenge just up front, right? Like that's a thing, right? And then just I don't know. I think everything else has pretty much been handled and mentioned already. So.
Thanks, Jeremy. I want to make sure that we have some time for questions from participants. And so while participants are thinking about their questions, which you could either put in the chat or hold on, and I'll give the floor to you in a moment. For our panelists, what advice would you have for potential mentors or participants that maybe we haven't touched on quite yet? So I've heard a lot about good, clear expectations from the mentor, doing what you can to make sure that students in the experience are able to sort of share that experience with other students at the same stage. Support is critical. So not only offering those strong expectations, but giving students the support they need to actually meet those expectations. Is there other advice that you could think of that mentors might like to hear?
I would say one thing that I found is really important is follow up. So having the mentor, like Jeremy was saying, some of his former students, right? Like coming back and telling him about their accomplishments, but then also too from the mentor side, like keeping connection with the students and following up occasionally with the students too. I found that to be extremely beneficial. Like some of the people that I met at my seed experience, I'm still connected to today, right? So it really does mean a lot to the student too, because it shows the student that this community is really invested in me and is a part of my successes.
That's a remarkable lasting impact. These are folks that you've known for 15 or 16 years that you've kept in touch with. That's amazing. So I have specifically questions for Jeremy about next steps for anyone who's interested in participating in Project Seed. But here I'll just stop and just make sure. Are there any questions from the participants out there in Zoom land that our panelists might be able to answer for you? Oh, excellent. Okay. I've got one question here. What feedback have students provided to Jeremy and others that can help mentors get better?
Let's see. Scanning a lot of things over the years here in my mind, right? Yeah, so like, well, I don't think there's much beyond what's already been shared, right? around what makes for a successful, experience from seed. And I think we kind of address the kinds of feedback that students may provide. I think, yeah, like for one thing, yeah, it is certainly always helpful when they have when they feel supported and kind of feel they have a community around them, right? That's really critical. I think that ensuring that you have that the mentor, and I'll specify that, is dedicated and has the time to dedicate with them, and that can be the official mentor of record might be the PI of a lab or of a group. The direct mentor, maybe that person, or it might be a really dedicated grad student or postdoc who has the bandwidth and the energy to do that. So those are things that stick out, and just like someone who's approachable, right? Being approachable is really important, just so that students feel that they can ask questions and feel that it is just a safe space that they can ask. And like for so many of them, right, like reading a scientific paper at this level, it's going to be one of the first times, if not the first time, they're doing that, and just a lot of things that are going to be new for them. So just establishing that, and yeah, those are kind of and yeah, just like opportunities in or outside the lab to connect with other students and kind of broaden their horizons as to what's going on in and outside of their own specific project, I think is helpful. Yeah.
Oh, we have another question from Mark. How are students matched to mentors, and is it based on research interest?
Should I handle that now, or should I handle that later when I'm going through like the next steps portion? I'm happy to do either one.
You can maybe just briefly
explain
your role as coordinator now, that we can kind of go into it a little bit more later.
Yeah, so we have students apply in February and March, and then the national office will send me students who mark our site or our sites as their region, as their location, and then yeah, so I then look through what they've shared in their essay questions, and then I reach out to them. I have an interview with them, and then from there I will match the students based on their interests and also on location, right? Like being in Philadelphia, right there, knowing the strengths and limitations of our public transit system, right? That's also just an important piece as well. And then sometimes there are other considerations. Like for the most part, I'll define like this is the 8-week block we're looking at, but it could be that there are one or two labs that say actually this block works better for me, and there might be a student for whom that works better. That was actually the case with one of Graham's colleagues last summer, where I actually placed a student in part because of interest, but also because that student's summer schedule aligned really well with that particular mentor schedule. So but research interest is certainly a big thing. Keeping in mind, of course, that these are high school students where they, the research projects that are going on and the nature of that work may be very new to them. So like what I did last summer was I had them rank the available projects, and I did utilize that in making the matches ultimately. I know that it works differently in different places. I know that there are some sites where, especially if it's just one or two mentors involved, where the mentors themselves may actually directly interview the students, and I've toyed with things like that in the past. But with where we are now and having a number of students and a number of mentors at different institutions, like that system is what I'm planning to do this year. But certainly, if there are mentors that want to be more involved or want to know more about the potential students to be matched with, that's a possibility. I've discussed that with a potential mentor a couple weeks ago. So good question.
Oh, I've got a question from Deb. Do you provide guidance for students to help them navigate their next steps in their education or future interests? And if so, what have you found most successful?
I can address that. And then if anyone else wants, if Sharon and or Brandon want to step in, they're welcome to. So that's looked different for me depending on my role, in addition to being coordinator at different points in time. You'll hear in my little slide deck coming up about like the nonprofit that I work with and all of the different schools that we partner with and offer, and where myself and my team are offering various college and career guidance and other things to students, mostly my colleagues who are based at their schools and whatnot. But one thing I do want to point out is that as of a couple of years ago, Project Seed has started offering asking students to attend once or twice per week webinar, lunch and learn professional development activities and seminars along some of these lines, in light of the fact that for a lot of sites, we're just not able to coordinate a lot of our own additional advising activities or additional workshops. So that's happening on the national level once or twice a week, which is nice. So that's one less thing for mentors to worry about. Certainly, I think really helpful. And I'm glad, Deb, that you brought this up. It's really helpful when the mentor or members of the lab, are checking in from time to time with students about this. I think oftentimes for some students, what they're thinking of as their next steps and possible paths can change over the course of their summer and the people that they're meeting. If there's an undergrad or grad student they're working with, whom they really establish a nice rapport, and feel comfortable asking questions to, like that can be really critical, I think, for students, and can really help. Again, just having someone who's approachable, relatable, etc.
I want to make sure that we have time just to go over the more nitty-gritty of seat participation. So if there are more questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And while you do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share Jeremy's logistical slides.
Yeah, you can just go straight to we've already talked about the mission. We know, even though, yeah, you can go straight to, there we go. Right, so you're on that, awesome. So, well, I think we've kind of talked through what the responsibility of a mentor. So yeah, getting involved. Key things here are, we are kind of towards the end of this year's cycle for recruiting new mentors, but we still have a little bit of time. So I was glad we were able to get this in before the end of January. I need to submit my proposals to ACS in early February. So what I'm asking for is that anyone who's interested or knows someone who's interested, this is for those who are here, but also those who are watching the recording, or certainly you can spread the word to other folks right, to let me know that you're interested, and or to reach out to discuss further. I ask you to do that within the next week, ultimately, ideally by next Wednesday, the 25th, in light of the deadline, in light of the fact that there's some project information that I will need by about the end of the month. These are slightly flexible deadlines, right? If someone emails me next Thursday, it's fine, right? And certainly, and if someone needs until February 1st or 2nd to get me their project information, that's okay. But I do want to make sure that I have time to, to address questions and to making revisions that I may need as I'm moving from information that's shared with me to what's submitted to ACS. So early February, I will submit each of the projects as part of my seat proposal to ACS. The national office will review that, and by the end of February or beginning of March, they will let us know about approvals. Generally, they approve most projects, especially if there are suitable or somewhat suitable matching funds, which we'll get to on, I believe, the next slide. But basically, you can kind of see here how it works with approvals, the student application window, and then review applications, and then being introduced to mentors, and then having the experience, and then having a final presentation / high school research symposium. If you want to go to so that's, again, so just reach out to me, shoot me an email. My email is on the first slide. I'll also put it in here at the bottom, sorry, in the chat. You can just reach out and just let me know that you're interested in that. And then what I'll do is, then what I need is this information for each project. So I'll need to know if you're, I'll need to know mentor name, contact information, title, abstract, and some information about the project. When I said that generally they'll approve projects, as long as the goals and purpose and activities are clear, and the supplemental info, namely around safety, is clear and relatively comprehensive, and there's matching funds that are close to what the national office is looking for, they'll usually approve projects or approve them with requests for very slight modifications. So it's pretty basic information, and I have some guidelines here as to how long these different pieces should be. I'm really grateful that these days, the past couple of years, I've been able to be in an environment where mentors are actually able to provide this information. In my early years in SEED, I would actually generally be piecing together and writing the project info myself, based on the conversations with potential mentors and looking at their websites. So it's really helpful when mentors actually write out that information. And it's generally, I don't think, and Graham can speak to this, from doing this. This is the current version of the questions about the years. It's not super time intensive to do this. It's also, this can be tentative. I definitely would say, if you're thinking about it, if it sounds interesting to you, to you or to a colleague or to a friend, definitely reach out and definitely propose a project. The exact title of the project, the exact nature of it can change. That's totally fine. SEED does not micromanage that at all. And I think they're okay with the National Office of me saying that. It's they just want to have a more or less of a sense of what you think is going to happen. Certainly, they also recognize, especially first-time mentors, that some pieces just may change over the course of this being your first summer taking on a student or students. So that's just the information that I would need by approximately January 31st, February 1st. Yeah. So that's those are the kind of the key details for us. And in case anyone was wondering, I work at Heights Philadelphia, which is a large and growing education nonprofit here in Philadelphia. And I mentioned that because because really when you think about the pipeline of students that we're able to connect with, will be drawing largely from the now 19 Philadelphia public high schools that we partner with, where we have embedded staff members in programming. So this is just a little more about just where I work, more just to kind of demonstrate this program really fits into this nonprofit where I work. This is our work really focuses on broadening access and opportunity for Philly students, specifically Philly students from underinvested communities. This kind of we recruit for this as part of as kind of a part of our overall summer program recruiting and matching. So we have a pretty strong and growing pipeline of possible students who are some of whom are part of existing college and career advising cohorts, some of whom are part of existing STEM programming and activities that we have, et cetera. So didn't want to harp on that for too long, just in case anyone kind of wanted context as to where the heck does Jeremy work, and in case anyone's and what angle is he talking from, and in case anyone's been in the Philly community for a while, you probably never heard of Heights. We're the merger of two other major urban ed nonprofits, Stepping Stone and Philly Futures. So, but no need to harp on that. It's the previous two slides I think that are really critical for folks to know about, and certainly we can share out information for your email, and anyone who emails me, I'll certainly send you the questions and the information that we need for your project.
Yeah, if it's okay, Jeremy, I'll send out both the recording and your slides to all
sure
registrants.
No problem. That would be great.
Fantastic. Any other questions from the participants that our panelists can address? I do want to echo what Jeremy said, that the putting the material together for the application was not a super time-consuming affair, and there's obviously complementary content that I've prepared for other projects for students, undergrads and grad students. So I didn't have to reinvent the wheel basically to come up with a project for a student. But it was important to think about something that'd be accessible to a high school student. I thought it would be valuable to make sure that the relevance was there, and I could maybe explain it without going into a lot of jargon. Mark has a question. Is there a minimum number of hours that students need to be in the lab each week?
Great question. Generally, the minimum would be like 30 to 32. We generally say like 30 to 36 is generally the range, but it's there's no like exact hard and fast rules. Have there been a couple of mentors over this where it's been more like 29 or 30? Sure, but it's supposed to be close to full time, and we say the upper end 35 rather than 40, since there are one or two events a week that students are asked to attend. That's a great question. Also, to piggyback on something that Graham just said, if you have if you're interested but you have any questions, or you're uncertain about any aspect of the project that you're proposing, like I don't just receive project information cold and upload it, right? So I'm also available as a resource as someone who originally trained in chemistry and is been around doing this for a while and working with students for a while as well. So happy to kind of help answer some questions in terms of the framing of your project and things that may come up. Thanks for bringing that up, Graham.
Of course. Great. Well, let me let me thank all of you for attending today. It's been great to hear from our panelists, and thanks to the three of you for agreeing to share your experiences. It's really interesting how each of your different approach to seed has sort of informed your experiences going forward. And I hope that the attendees got a good sense about what seed can offer to them in their own growth and experience. Again, if you have any other questions, we'll send the recording and slides around, and I'll make sure that everyone has everyone's contact information as well. So with that, thank you very much, and hope to see you around both virtually and in real life around Philadelphia.
Thanks so much for having us, and I hope to hear from a number of you very soon. Thanks so much.